All right, so it smiles all around. This is a Biz Talk I've been looking forward to for a long time, and we're finally doing it. Today we're chatting to Alberto Mose from Mose Industries. Alberto, welcome. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. How are you doing? Well?
Yeah, good. We're going to get into it a little bit later, but Alberto is coming to us all the way from Kenya as he's wrapping up a project there. So I'm really glad we got to chat while you're out and about, and looking forward to hearing more about that a little bit into the interview. But to start with, tell us more about who is Alberto, where are you from, a little bit of your background and who you are as a person.
Chris, I was born in the Eastern Cape, the beautiful Eastern Cape, near a little town called Alexandria, in the very rural part of the Eastern Cape, coastal region. Had a wonderful upbringing there, don't regret one day of it. And very soon after school, I started away from the area and started my career in construction very, very early. So in the first couple of years of my career, I actually bought a business that was a restaurant and nightclub and pub. And then at the same time, also started a glass business and started my career in construction in balloon stick frame construction, which is basically timber construction that you see mostly in the United States and some places in Europe, and a very, very small percentage of it in South Africa. My real passion lies with carpentry and training people. But so subsequently, over the last 25 years or so, we've developed into a full-blown construction company in all different disciplines of construction. So going back to who I am, I now live in Cape Town. Absolute passion for teaching people. I have a great interest and passion for sustainable development and renewable energy. And I know it sounds like a cliche, we hear that so much, but it's really something that we get into on a practical level on the projects we're involved with, especially where I'm here in Kenya at the moment. There's such a need for it. And we can later more about why I'm here and what we're doing and why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, and I've got to get to this question first. So you started off by owning a restaurant / nightclub. You've got to have one or two funny stories from that, because I mean, those working in those, having a restaurant or a pub like that, you work long hours, and I'm sure there's one or two great stories you can share with us.
Well, there's owning a place like that, generates a type of stories you don't normally want to remember or talk about. That's unfortunately or fortunately how it is. And I was very young still as well. So I think the fun part of owning the business for me was exactly the part of it that one doesn't want to talk about. But it's a very quick way to learn about people and personalities. And in that time, I was also studying psychology. Part-time at UCT, at UPE, my apologies, which is now the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. So studying psychology and getting to deal with that side of people is quite an interesting thing. But yes, there were quite a few stories in my time in Kenya. I think probably one of my most fond ones was literally packing up our pub one night with a barman and stock and a vehicle and moving the whole pub down to the beach, and we closed the pub at 5 o'clock in the morning. So very relaxed, laid back little town, and that's the type of thing that happened there.
I said everybody goes through that phase in their 20s where you get together with your friends and you're like, we're gonna open a bar or a restaurant or a nightclub or something, and not necessarily always the best way, but like you say, it's a great way to learn about people and all spheres of life, really. Anyway, so let's get into our good news stories for today. Everybody needs some good news. On your side, what's some good news?
Well, good news is right now where I'm sitting at the moment, I'm in a project in the western parts of Kenya. Very rural part of the country, and actually very excited to be part of the project. It's where they're building the world's first completely renewable energy city called Mwale Medical Technology City. And it's very exciting stuff. And one of the reasons that I'm very excited, and that's a really good news story to me, is people here don't have a lot of skills. And it just really blends in beautifully with what I'm passionate about. So we've got some power tools arriving today, and some of the local workers, believe it or not, have never seen a power tool before in their life.
Sure.
With very primitive equipment. We're constructing or overseeing the construction of a 1 megawatt solar plant that will be supplying the hospital and the first parts of the city with electricity. And construction is underway at the moment. And good news story is I'm getting to teach some of the locals new skills they would never ever have dreamt about before we got here. And also the local contractor. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's always a good news story for me if you're involved with the project, especially if it's far away from home and we walk away from it, knowing that we've uplifted the people and taught them new skills. So I'm going back to site this afternoon after we've chatted, heading back, receiving our power tools on site, and I'm looking forward to doing a bit of a training session with the local guys who are very excited to show them a thing or two with very good power tools on site.
That's amazing. I mean, one doesn't realize the knock-on effect of a project like that. So you're providing sustainable, sort of a self-sustaining city, right, with the likes of electricity, which then has a knock-on effect of being able to make use of things like power tools that then they can learn skills from, and then it grows and develops from there, and basically builds an entire economy really from that, because you just get one knock-on effect, knock-on effect, knock-on effect. I think that's absolutely amazing. That's really, really good news. I think
absolutely, yeah. It's very early stages. So it's still very rough and rural. There's no electricity on site, for example, so we work with generators. But what an absolutely amazing place and amazing people to work with. They are so willing to work and susceptible for new knowledge and to learn. And of course, I mean, it makes it so much more fun to teach somebody who really wants to learn. Getting to know the people's personality and teaching them new skills is one of the most rewarding things you can ever possibly do in my industry. And if you share my passion, over and all the other benefits of what we're doing here, that will come later. Big and big ambitions in this place I see, an enormous project. But this little bit that I'm involved with now, the very start of it, and the very basics of it is the part that's really a good news story for me. And just in the small space of time that we've been here for a little bit more than a month, I've already seen some guys getting better at what they do, and the skills we brought to the table and the knowledge we bring here makes an enormous difference. And I'm very proud of that. And at the same time, we're learning so much about appreciation, so much about being content with what you have and living the way they do. It's a really hard experience.
No, definitely. And I think we'll have to chat and tap into our networks and get some more PR around this, because this is definitely a good news story to share and a project to follow moving forward, showing how that develops. So I think you and I are going to have another conversation around that one again later. It's funny, every time Alberto and I have a chat, we just uncover another layer and find something new to work with. So that's great. My good news stories aren't as good. So one of them being, as of yesterday, the interest rate's not going to increase here in South Africa, which is good news for us. And I've actually noticed a change. Now, you think going into sort of the end of the year, everybody's going to wrap up and go to holiday and things like that. But with the announcement that we're not being put into lockdown moving forward, we're going to have a normal festive season. Tourism is open. All of those things. Definitely can see everyone's doing that last push for the end of the year. So business is starting to open up. The economy is starting to rebuild. Even the rand strengthening, can you believe? And so it's not something you hear every day. So that's really good news. I think we're going to be building towards a much better future into 2021. I definitely think that's the case. I think if everybody works now and plans and carries on through this period, it's going to make a big difference. So companies, there's a little hint for you. Keep pushing through the holiday season and keep doing things for 2021. You'll need it. And then the other good news, I'll give you the brief details and I'll share the link when I post this. Goldie Hawn, you're familiar with Goldie Hawn? Yep. So the famous,
but I am.
the famous actress, she's actually providing a free portal for parents to teach their children mindfulness lessons. online for free. And we've seen sort of a huge increase, not only amongst adults, but also your younger generation with the pressures of life really at the moment. I mean, it's a lot different to when you and I used to grow up. When we were running around farms and playing with catties and riding our bicycles and things like that. And it's a bit different now.
Sounds pretty much what I'm doing right now, Chris.
I think I must come with you on your next trip. That sounds like heaven. But it's great that somebody is taking the time to provide a free portal to assist parents during these times to work with their kids and teach them mindfulness and help them with the pressures of today. And I think that's great. So I'll definitely share the link to this. So Alberto, we've been chatting a little bit. We've been hinting around everything. So let's start there. Okay, so when you started Mose Industries back in the day, you were focusing more on the timber construction side of things. How has that evolved from there to where you are now?
Chris, I'm speaking under correction, but when I started my career, I think timber front housing in South Africa had about a 2.8% market share, 2.8% market share of residential housing in South Africa. And unfortunately, that number has got even lower. So it's still an amazing form of construction. And of course, timber is the only 100% recyclable building material in the world. So it is still a fantastic building method. But unfortunately, because of conditions in South Africa and availability of timber, it's not necessarily the cheapest method of construction. So although it's something I'm still passionate about, it's unfortunately not a big thing in South Africa anymore. Occasionally we'll get inquiry for a timber house or timber front housing, and there are a couple of architects who are really passionate about designing with timber. I think other more conventional methods, or considered now conventional, in the United States at the time I started, stick frame or balloon frame timber construction made up about 85% of the residential market, and that's now declined to below 60% of the residential market. And another method of construction is taken over called SIPs, structurally insulated panel systems. And that is also a huge market share. It's not something that's really taken off in South Africa. I've spent many years of my life being involved with developing and in research and development with alternative building systems. It's a mindset and a concept in South Africa that we are really still struggling with. We only now, and I believe, starting to touch on the real meaning of the word sustainability and all the aspects of it, especially in my industry. So, there's still this, with the general population in South Africa, this misconception that alternative forms of construction other than brick and mortar is inferior, where it's not really. There are so many amazing ways of construction. So long story short, I would say 90% or more of the construction we do now is conventional brick and mortar. We do the occasional steel structure buildings, which have become a bit bigger in South Africa. Problem with that though is the product is fantastic, but they didn't develop the product along with the skills in parallel so that the method of steel structure construction in South Africa could be rolled out sustainably. So although there's nothing wrong with the construction method, the problem is with the skills to implement it. I've been involved with quite a few training programs. Our dream projects for the last couple of years have been high-end residential, houses ranging from 15, anything up to 35 million or more. And we do industrial and commercial construction as well, which is basically what we're doing now. So we've been involved with solar plants, we've been involved with airports, we've been involved with office buildings, mixed density, high density developments. You can name it, and we've done it over the years. The biggest percentage of our market at the moment is focusing on high-end residential.
Okay, so I've got like 100 questions now, right? So the first one I wanted to go is rewind back to the panel construction type. Do you think it could be in South Africa, but also, I mean, you guys don't just work in South Africa. You're sitting in Kenya right now, and you can do projects pretty much everywhere. Do you think that the panel type construction with a bit of education and uptake from the market could be a sustainable solution to what we know is housing is a massive socioeconomic issue, not only in South Africa, but actually globally. In your mind, do you think that's a better solution?
Yes, but there's an enormous amount of education that needs to be done along with that. Like I said to you before, education is a major problem in South Africa. Of course, poverty, we hear it every day. But the major problem is really educating people about the technology out there. And obviously getting also the opportunity to implement it. I mean, there's been a couple of projects, there's been initiatives in the past. The ABSA Show Village, Sustainable Construction Show Village competition and the NHBRC involvement. And so many alternative building systems that's been involved. And some of them make sense and others don't. The point is still, whenever a new building system is rolled out, or when I say new to South Africa, some of them have been in existence for a very long time. In my opinion, there's too much focus on the building system and too little focus on the implementation of the building system and the skills development behind it. We have one great advantage in South Africa, and I see it when I'm traveling abroad as well, is we have a lot of multi-skilled people. We have a fantastic system in South Africa we call RPL, recognition of prior learning. So whatever you've done throughout your career can be used for formative and summative assessments and to build a career path. So it's fantastic that in our country and with our systems, we can recognize learning, we can recognize experience and create a formal education or formal training with that. But the point is, there's no point in bringing a system into the country, or for that matter, and we're more than capable to do so, developing alternative building systems in South Africa, unique to the area. But we don't pay enough attention to the skills necessary to really make it work. And I think it's a shift. There's so much technology out there and so many building systems out there that we should really think about focusing and shifting our focus to developing the right skills and educating people about other ways of construction. And then we can concentrate on what system we want to use. We can identify a couple of systems and develop the skills necessary to implement. But I've seen so many building systems, structurally insulated panel systems, SIPs I spoke about earlier, lightweight steel frame, timber frame. There's a couple of lightweight aerated concrete precast panel systems, and a couple of names, which I obviously won't mention now, that I've seen implemented in South Africa with really poor building quality. And again, most of these systems, the problem is not with the construction method or the construction system. The problem is with the skills necessary to really put a great product out there.
And that brings me to my next point / question is from what I'm hearing is your Mose Industries not only does your traditional building, I've bought a property, get an architect, I'll build a house, and get a construction company, and like everybody knows day to day, but you guys as industry, not only are you at the forefront of available technology, building techniques and things like that, but you can also do all types of large scale projects right from the beginning all the way through. So right at the initial stages when you're looking at design and how to work with the budgets, to training and development that's required, all the way through the entire project, beginning to end, every touch point that's needed. So you're not just the construction company that I pay a whole lot of money for, you arrive, you build, and you disappear. You're involved with every touch point on the project.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've been doing construction as long as we have, and I say we, because it's not just about me, I've been doing construction for 26 years now. But I'm also surrounded by, some very interesting people who've been doing what they do for a long time. And if you take that accumulative knowledge, combined knowledge of the construction industry, we're not really just about construction. Construction is such a small part of a complete construction process or project. Doing the wet works, as a general term we use in South Africa, of a construction project and the finishes, is a very small part of it. There's a lot of time and effort and planning that goes into a project, even before design phase, especially when it comes to developments. So we really like to get involved at the really early stages of the project for two reasons, basically. The first one, and I've seen this happen a couple of times this year, where projects are designed by architects and designers with the basic idea of where they're heading with budget, but not the intricate knowledge of the practical implementation implementation of certain designs that we as building contractors have and projects have. So what I'd really like to see happen in the market, I've experienced this a couple of times this year, is that we get involved as project managers and building consultants with architects and town planners at the earliest stage. Just to give you a quick, very practical idea of what I'm talking about, there's been 3 projects very recently that we tendered on. All 3 of them high-end residential projects. And in the tender process, I mean, our aim is, and I want to make this very clear, our aim is never to be the cheapest. We don't build down to a price, we build up to a standard. And tenders in South Africa at the moment are very tight. I mean, it's the way the economy is, and it's the conditions we have to survive under. But if I end up somewhere in the middle with any tender we participate in, I'm very happy. We don't need to be the cheapest. But I also don't want to be the most expensive. In all 3 of these instances, we were actually the lowest tender, believe it or not. And in all 3 of these instances, the projects didn't go ahead. So by the time we submitted the tender, along with 4 or 5 other builders that participated in the tender, everything was already designed. The architect had already discussed the budget with the client. All 5 builders were ballpark more or less the same amount. Very, very marginal differences between the 5 building contractors or contractors that participated in the tender. And once the tender results came out, only to discover that it was 20 or 30% over the client's budget. And then the client decides to scrap the project and rather not go ahead. Where if somebody with the right knowledge and experience sat down with the client and the architect at the beginning stages, and help the architect achieve his architectural and aesthetic design by looking at the budget right from the beginning and assisting with different construction methods, different ways of doing things. That project could have been designed within a specific budget and would have gone ahead, irrespective of whether it would have been with us or any other builder for that matter. So that's a really sad part of it for me. So if possible and where possible, I like to get involved in the really early stages of a project. And most of the time, we give that service free to our clients, where we get involved very early, give advice, and help the architect with some ideas and some practical construction methods and construction materials of how to achieve a specific project.
Whereby then the client gets what they want and what they've given as a directive, as a brief to your architect or designer or whatever the case may be, but with that still falls within the project's budget, so it can go ahead. Because a project that doesn't happen not only affects your company, but it's your employees and the suppliers who supply all the materials for the project, and so it goes. So it's important. So let's do this. Let's do a quick exercise. And I think we're going to use an example, but it could be applied to any large project, like what you're doing now in Kenya. It's a self-sustaining town that's being built with a hospital and the various elements. But we'll simplify it now. So I have 25 million rand. I've got a piece of land that I want to build my fancy little house on, and I'm a little bit more forward thinking, so I want more technology included in my property with self-sustaining methods built into it. So we're looking at, from the beginning, things like rainwater collection and solar and all the various different things, and something that integrates with the environment that I'm living in. Say it's here in the Western Cape and I wanted to form part of the fauna and flora that's very unique to this area. It's one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. Surprisingly, yes, you might have learned something today. Anyway, so take me through your ideal process of where you would get involved with the project and how Mose Industries would roll out from beginning to end. So with 2 scenarios, one being you're just involved as a consultant for the project from the beginning, to being the consultant, tendering, you get the construction and it rolls out. Educate me, bring some awareness. How would I would know where to start? I just want a nice house and it's environmentally friendly and doesn't look ugly. How do we do this?
Well, Chris, your first description there was the type of projects that I really, really love. When we get involved with a very early stage of the project and a client comes to us with your budget and the area that they like, often a property they already own, an open piece of land somewhere, the first thing we would do, and in your case that would be quite an interesting choice to make, is marry the personality with the correct architect. Architects are extremely important and must be involved from a very early stage. So the first thing that would happen is we'll sit down and talk about your expectations and your budget, and make sure that those expectations are realistic before you even approach an architect. The second thing we would do is make sure that we get you married up with an architect that suits your personality and your needs and the type of design you want to go. We work with different type of architects, and it's very important. To me, it's one of the most important decisions on any specific residential project, is that an architect and a client really gets along well. You can adapt to a certain point, but for me, that personality match is so absolutely important.
And you've got a bank of architects that you can get to know me as a person and say, you know what, I think X, Y, or Z person would be the right fit for you.
Absolutely. So, and equally important would have to be to get an engineer and a QS involved. We've got an absolutely fantastic QS we've been working with for years and years and years that gets involved with the budget of every single one of our projects, also from a very early stage. And then a fantastic engineer. And that's the power triangle that a typical residential project would need to have from the word go, along with the project manager.
I have a question. We're doing a dummy's guide to projects and construction here. What is a QS and what do they do?
Okay, QS quantity surveyor. That's the guy that's going to quantify whatever architect or engineer designs, and very often get involved with the budget right from the beginning. So that's an extremely important part. A QS, with our construction knowledge and the relationship we have with him, he's the guy that will say to you, Chris, no, you cannot have a house with the airport and 3 warehouses next door, and a water park for 25 million rand. Let's be realistic about the design. So that's where we go back to the expectations, and we'll make sure the client understands more or less what it is they can expect for that type of budget. And then we move along and we start getting the marriage going between the architect and the client. There's some architects that design more conservatively and others that are more along the line of what you described now, wants to use a lot of technology. Look at green building. That's a term for discussion for another day. And a lot of sustainable ways of doing construction. And then there's also the more conservative types. The one is not better than the other. It's just a different type of design approach. And equally important, the engineers. I'll give you a very practical example. Some engineers are a bit more conservative in their design, and understandably so. They need to make sure that a building lasts and that it stays together. Other engineers are prepared out there and do some really interesting designs and take more risk. When I say more risk, not more risk for the client, more risk in terms of what they're trying to achieve that perhaps hasn't been done before. And this is a conversation I often also have with clients, that without mentioning any names of anybody I work with in the industry, that's very important, the practical example that a house owner like you would understand. You get two types of engineers. The one engineer might charge you 100,000 rand for a design, and the other engineer would charge you 150,000 rand for a design.
Okay.
For the structural designs of your house. Which one are you going to appoint? So here's what happens. Often we see it as building contractors what happens, and very early already when we start receiving what we call bending schedules. Those are little documents we receive to show us how much of any type of steel goes into a structure, for example. You'll work with the engineer. They'll charge you 100,000 rand to do the designs for your house. We'll just throw steel into the building as much as it's covered, and the steel will cost a fortune. One is charging 150,000 rand. We'll really sit down and do some funky and interesting designs and really design light. When I say light, I don't mean inferior structure. I mean clever, real engineering. And very often, the difference between the two is more than the difference between the cost of those two engineers initially.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask again. So then the engineer, and again, we're not knocking an industry. I mean, some people might find as their fit that type of engineer who throws steel at everything and wants to to cover all those bases and fine. But just in this example, the engineer is initially slightly more expensive long-term over the whole project because of their the more homework they do and the thinking out of the box and going that little bit extra mile lands up saving a lot more money on the project later on in terms of materials required, etc., that go into it.
You're exactly right, except you were not expressive enough, Chris. A lot. A good engineer and architect can really make a difference on the project with clever designs. And the reason I say this, and coming back to what we said in the beginning, that's why I like getting involved at the very early stages of the project and get that marriage right. You can understand with the client, getting to know client's personality very early already and what their needs are, what you need to bring to the table. And getting the right engineer involved and the great architect involved with the project is so very important. For the client's budget, one, and also ultimately for what you want to see when the project is done. And the working relationship throughout. The process of building a house should be a journey to remember. There are so many stories out there about building projects that's gone bad. And unfortunately, a part of my job is, to try and prove the opposite.
Yeah, no, of course, there's some very bad reputations out there, and we're not even going to touch it. We're going to carry on with the process. So we've met, you've gotten to know me, we've found the right architect, we've found the right quantity surveyor, we've found the right engineer, we've already got the right construction project manager on board. Now what do we do?
Okay, then there's a couple of things that needs to happen that any good builder should know. We take care of the paperwork and all the stuff you don't want to deal with. So while the architect is finalizing his last little bit of designs and all the details inside the house, at that point we often also get an interior designer involved. And I must also add here, some architects we've worked with also does that part of the work. They do interior design and they get very much involved with the finishing of the house. And some architects choose to not get involved at all. And it doesn't make the one or the other. So get an interior designer involved if needed, and then we start preparing for the construction project once the budget is finalized and all the designs are finalized. There's some legal stuff that needs to happen in South Africa. The National Housing Consumers Measures Protection Act, long description, tells us that every new house in South Africa should be enrolled with the NHBRC, that's the National Home Builders Registration Council. It is law in South Africa. So that is something that is something we do right at the beginning of the project. The National Housing Consumers Measures Protection Act says that a new house has to be enrolled 14 days prior to construction starting. There's a fee to be paid to them. We handle all of that paperwork that you don't want to handle. We get the enrollment process done. We get the enrollment certificate. Once that's done, and usually the architect has handled municipal approvals and approval of all the plans. We start planning for construction days. There's a site handover that happens and we get underway. And from there, we start updating daily. And I'll give you a brief description of that in a second.
Okay, so yeah, no, I don't want to do all that legal stuff. I mean, I'm like to think I'm relatively well educated and I've covered a few of the acts in this country, but I didn't even know about that one. So it's good to have somebody on board who's going to take care of all of those things. So we're on the roll. It's been 2 weeks. We can start construction. We've done a little ceremony on my plot and start building. We've all hugged each other and had some champagne or something. And yes, okay. So now what do we do?
I guess on our projects, we're going to have a little silver spade. We're going to do a ground loaning. The champagne, absolutely yes. That's how we start our projects. And from there, we start building. We're going to establish on the site as principal contractor with all the right contracts in place and appoint the subcontractors where we have to. And at a very early age of the project, if it's a residential site, we're going to get a site office up and going. Our health and safety in place, which is extremely important for us, occupational health and safety on the site. That when you come and visit your project and come and see how we're doing, we can do induction and tell you about all the safety rules and regulation of the site. Because remember, when you do the site handover certificate, you or your principal agent have now handed over your site to us and we're in full control of it. So even your safety as the owner of the site, it then becomes my responsibility. So when you arrive there, you're going to get a hard hat with your name on and our logo in the front, and that will be kept on site for you, and only you use it for when you come and visit us. And how we do things differently is, in most instances, we have full live HD cameras on our sites from a very early stage of the project, and that gives us 24-hour access to our site to see what's going on. We don't always give everybody access to those cameras for obvious reasons. In most cases, we give our professional team, that includes our QS, quantity surveyor, our engineer, our architect, and sometimes even the interior designer, access to those cameras. So an engineer can sit behind his desk or on his cell phone and access our site at any time and see what's going on with the site. That's the first part of it. Second part of it is making you as the client feel you involved as much as you want to be. Some people don't want to be involved at all. They want to give us a call and say, I'm moving in 10 months from now, on the 14th of September. Can you please make sure I've got beer in my fridge? And then do that, and we'll even put a little chocolate on the pillow and make the bed. But in some cases, we want to be involved and see what happens with their money, so we accommodate them. What we do is we create online Dropbox folders and other online folders, little company or project WhatsApp groups, and assess the client's personality. Some clients don't want to see a lot of photographs every day. Some of them don't even want to see a lot of photographs every week. So it depends on the client's needs and the type of architect and engineer we work with. We're very sensitive to that. If it's a client that wants to see a couple of photographs every day, our company rule in general is that every site manager on every one of our sites take at least 30 photographs every day, load them onto a Dropbox folder every day, and share them on a WhatsApp group, the internal company WhatsApp group, every day. So every day I'm aware of what happens on all of our building sites. All photographs are still stored online, and our access and our clients and engineers and our architects have access to all of those photographs. So if we have a client that's gone on holiday in Dubai, I was working there for 3 months, and this wonderful project is going on in South Africa or elsewhere, you can go sit down with a cup of coffee, open his folder, and see exactly what's been done on site for that day. And then on top of that, we give a short report that we publish once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, depending on the client or the architect's needs, where we address delays on the site, if there are any weather conditions, any extras or changes there might be, and we really keep the client informed. And if it's a type of client that wants to come and visit his site virtually, and Chris, you're busy doing business up in Joburg, and you want to see what's happening with your site in Cape Town, we'll give you login details to the cameras at least once a week. And for 2 or 3 hours, you have full access to your site, and you can see exactly what's happening. And sometimes, if you're lucky and my guys are informed, you'll even get a wave or two from the guys having a look at them.
That's great. So you get updated through the process as much or as little as you want as the client. There's nothing hidden. There's no surprises. It's the communication's there, and if you want more, like I would probably be a difficult client who'd want to know everything every 5 seconds. But if you're a client that just, they trust you guys, that they've given their directive, they've paid their budget, just make it happen. You can even do that.
Exactly. And what's very important, Chris, very important, is I'm sure if I send you a couple of photographs, or you log into the Dropbox folder or look on the WhatsApp group, and you see a couple of photographs after each other, very close-up photographs of these steel bars tied together with wire. And you've had a really hard day, want to know where your money's going and what your house looks like. You're not going to be very happy with me having to look at photographs of steel. You're not going to unless you want to. Those are for the engineer. Of course, the engineer wants to see how we're lapping steel and how we're tying it together before we pour concrete, what those details look like. So my guys are trained on site to take photographs for the engineer, for the architect, and for you, the client. So what we understand you want to see is A, where your money's going, B, is there progress on the project, C, what the overall picture look like. So my guys was going to stand up on the hill late afternoon, the sun setting behind Table Mountain. There's a beautiful sunset. You can see all of the construction work going on. Walls have gone up for the day. You can really see progress, and those are the type of photographs that they're going to put in the client's folder. The close photographs of the steel and the bricks and the concrete work, that's going to go into the engineer's folder. And the beautiful architectural design and the complicated stuff that architects think that they put on paper magically appears on site. Those are the type of things that we take photographs of, put it in the architect's folder so that he can really understand where we're heading and that he feels assured that we understand what is designed and how we build it.
No, but surely, Alberto, come on. Do you really go into as much detail as looking at how much wire has been wasted on holding steel pipes together on such a large project? I mean, those are small consumables in the bigger schemes of a project like that. Do you really go into that much detail?
Just on the wire, that's purely for the engineer. So that has to do with structural integrity of steel. So the example I gave, the engineer want to see that steel is bound together in the correct way before we pour concrete, that it's placed correctly, that there are no shortcuts in terms of the type of steel used. And that's only one example. Close-up photographs, we get things in concrete that are technical terms. For example, something we call honeycombing. No, that's not a crunchy that you can eat. Honeycombing is a technical term for holes in concrete when the concrete has not been compacted properly. So it means the concrete loses structural integrity. So when an engineer looks at the concrete and he sees that, he's very concerned and remedial work has to be discussed. So we know what an engineer wants to see for him to have peace of mind. I don't want an engineer to have a huge field bill because he's working with or for Mose Industries. I want him to feel relaxed, drive to site when he needs to, where he wants to, not every single day. So our engineers that work on the projects with us must feel safe and secure and know what goes on in the projects, and also have that sense of security that we know what we're looking at and that we're sharing in line with them in terms of what they want to see on the building site. And exactly the same with architects. If an architect knows that the builder understands his design, secondly, passionate about his design, it very seldom happens that we build houses we don't like. We love every single one of them, especially towards the end. And if an architect is involved with the project, we really don't want to see him feel like he needs to come to a building site every day, or feel concerned about whether his design is going to be executed or not. He needs to know the builder's got the vision, the builder understands what he wants, and that he's busy doing that on site in the best possible way. So we understand what architects look like. If it's a beautiful gable wall that the architect has designed, or a cantilever slab overhang detail, all technical terms they use, or a rim flow infinity pool detail at the very early stages. You look at it, it looks like a concrete bowl with a hole in the front, but there's still glass that's going to go in. There's really little intricate details that architect looks at. And there are also trends at the moment for the last couple of years, and especially now, there are trends in architecture. One being an example is off-shutter concrete. So what that is exposed concrete that you can see that doesn't get plastered or painted. And it's a very difficult thing to do right. But if it's done right, it's such an enormous part of a lot of very modern architectural design these days. And we want the architects to know that we understand that and that we put every effort in to make sure that we achieve that perfect finish.
No, for sure. Look, Alberto, you and I can sit and chat for ages, and I really want you to be able to also get onto site so that you can do your training that I know you're looking forward to. So we've started the project, we got feedback as much as I want and as everybody needs throughout the project. We go through the project, how do we wrap up, how does it go? Let's go through the last few stages. Because obviously we've only just scratched the surface, but let's carry on.
Very quickly, towards the end of the project, if there's an interior designer involved, we go into a process we call snagging. So what essentially happens in most of the building contracts in South Africa, we're going to achieve a date or reach a date we call practical completion. Practical is the contractual date that we achieve. And what that basically means in the contract is that you achieve the stage of the project where the house or structure can be used for its intended purpose. So you have water, everything is working, everything is perfect. But it may be that there's still a couple of snags, like on any other project. Snags, little touch-ups, little things that's got to be attended to, but the house can be used. From that date, there's a period that starts on the contract. That's 3 months. In those 3 months, the architect or the client can compile snag lists and little things that they are unhappy with or that they want us to pay attention to. And we then work on that list for those 3 months. So within the 3 months, we have to complete the list. And then we reach what we call final completion. By this point, the client is either moved into the house already or about to move into the house. And that's a part of every project that I enjoy the most, because that's a part where we really go all out. You can, if the house was finished with our involvement of the project, which it is most of the times, you're going to have beers in your fridge. There will be cold champagne, nice. And there will be beautiful flowers on the kitchen table when you walk in. And that's really the part that makes us, different from other builders, I think, is really making that client feel like they're walking into their home. And that's often the biggest investment you're going to make in your life. And we try and treat it that way.
Sure. I want you to build my house now. Okay, fine. I can't have the water park, but can I at least have the infinity pool?
We can work on that, Chris.
Alberto, last couple ones. Obviously, with projects, and you're working very closely with a group of people. So one of them is there will be conflict at some point. I mean, it's inevitable. And also, what happens if you're getting through the project and something could happen? I mean, there could be a change in the exchange rate or something like that. We're not going to make budget. How do you approach? Because anybody and everybody knows any form of project, whether it's a construction project or whatever project, those are always going to happen. So how does Mose Industries approach those kind of conflicts and also unforeseen changes?
Well, let's handle the unforeseen changes first, Chris. Mostly we call those VOs, or variation orders. They can either come from a client or from the architect. And we've seen some funny ones. We can have another conversation about that. But point here is, if a client decides along the way they want to change something, we make it very clear to them that there will be a variation order. And normally with a variation order, there's a cost involved. So firstly, we'll identify what it is that the client wants changed or the architect wants changed. That will often go to the QS, we'll put a value next to that, and then we'll send it back to the client or architect or the principal agent for approval first. So we'll show how that influences the budget and how it influences the timeline on the project. So that clear communication is important. There's often a time claim or there isn't. So you do get variation orders that influences budget but does not influence time. It depends on what it is. But we always try and communicate that very, very clearly. And very important is to have a meeting on site or elsewhere once every couple of weeks, once a month, with the client and the principal agent. Sit down and just recap on the budget, recap on where the project program is heading, and keep everybody updated. That way, there's no surprises. And everybody signs off on everything. So again, it depends on how the client wants to be involved in the project, but we always try and structure it so that we all sit down as a professional team, as a building contractor, as a project manager, and as a client, at the very least once a month, and sometimes once a week, and recap on all these things and make sure that everybody is on exactly the same page.
Oh, fantastic. And that'll minimize anything else that would happen and go with it. Alberto, I can chat as always with you for hours. You're heading back home from tomorrow and you've got a lot of work to do today. So I'm going to say thank you and let you carry on. Any parting thoughts that you would like to share? Any information that's relevant that you still want to share that we haven't covered?
No, Chris, I just want to close by saying this. I see clients weekly. And I just want to say to you and other people out there, believe me, and please go and have a look on our Instagram and Facebook page. In the construction industry, there are actually many good news stories out there. And you don't have to go far to go look for them. My personality in my life is about looking at the glass half full, not half empty. So when you've had a bad experience in the construction industry or heard about somebody who did, really make the effort to also go look at the good news stories, because there's some fantastic builders out there, other than us as well, fantastic architects and engineers. And the building industry is something we're passionate about and fight for. So please, if you ever have a bad story or a bad experience in the construction industry, even if you don't want to do a project, please give me a call and just have a chat with me. And I'll tell you some really, really beautiful good news stories that's going to blow your mind and change your mind.
Sure. That's powerful. Thank you, Alberto. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. And I think we will have you back again sometime very soon on BizTalks.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.